welcome to Stand Up. My name's Pete Dominic. I, of course, am the host of this here show. Thank you so much for joining me. Last week was probably the most listened to week of the podcast, and I hope a lot of you folks are coming back and joining me again today, here every day with a great news recap and almost always two great guests. And today is the Monday show, if you're listening along chronologically, and normally I try to have Maura Quint on for Maura Mondays, but I got back late from my weekend trip and we couldn't get together to connect. But I do have two great guests joining me. Former Navy SEAL, Commander of the Navy SEAL Team 2, Mike Hayes, is joining me to talk all things Afghanistan and more. And Anushay Hossain, who I always enjoy talking to, is a great guest. As always, we had a great conversation. So both of them are coming up. I got the news coming up, but just quickly wanted to share about my weekend. So I told you I would tell you why I went down to D.C., but I wanted to wait till after it was over because it was kind of a private event. Glenn Kirshner invited some of his listener subscribers to join him at a special kind of meet and greet for all of his supporters, something I should be doing. And he invited me to come down and say a few words and network and meet some people. And it was great. Cynthia Oxney and Paul Butler and Allison Gill. And it was great. We had a really great time. And it was so awesome meeting some of those people. Hopefully some of them are listening to the show today or will be this week. But it was a lot of fun. I was supposed to go alone. I was just going to go down Saturday and come back Sunday. And then at the last moment, I said, you know what, Ava, you should go with me. We'll visit some colleges. And then Val said she wanted to go, and we conned Jewel into go as well. So the four of us went and had an awesome weekend together. And I did this. Ava and I went to see Georgetown. We went on that campus. Later on, Val and Jewel caught up with us, but we scootered over on the electric scooters to the Georgetown campus, which is one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. Georgetown, beautiful area, old area of Washington, D.C., of course. And we just walked on the campus. It was, pretty open. There was no security necessarily there. And it was buzzing. There were freshmen or there were college students everywhere in the quad. And it was just a beautiful, sunny day. And so there we are. And I just see Ava, my 16-year-old, about to be a junior in high school, just, her head exploding like, wow, this is college. I mean, there were kids everywhere. It was the quintessential, first week of school, signing up for clubs, and everybody out, hanging out in this beautiful sunny day. And so I said, you know what, Ave, why don't you just walk up 40 feet ahead of me, and you just, I was intimating that she just kind of act like a college student, get the college experience. And I think she got that. So she did. And I highly recommend you do that. When you're showing your kids around a college campus, if there's a lot going on especially, just let them explore it themselves. Allow them to let other kids think that they're college students. Let them feel what it's like to be a college student, just a little bit, just a hint of it, just a scent of it. And I was loving it. I was watching her walk across campus, and I was like, I wish we could get in one of these dorms, just show her one of the dorms. And so I just look up at this beautiful old stone dorm, look like a castle. And this dude walks out. I was like, hey, man, you living there? And he's like, yeah, freak, why don't you back off? I'm like, no, he didn't say anything. He's like, yeah. And I go, hey, would you mind showing my daughter that dorm? We're just on here for a campus tour. We don't have an appointment. I just thought it'd be great if she saw what the inside of the dorm looks like. He takes one look at Ava, and he's like, yeah, no problem. So he takes her inside, and he was real class act, good guy, came out, talked to him for a little while. He then later invited her to a party and kept snapping her and texting her. So in the end, I'm not sure what I got her into, but it was awesome. It was a great experience. She had a great experience. She got really excited, and we told her how, there's no way we could afford that. And she probably wouldn't get in unless she was in all honors classes, which she could be. She was invited to, but decided not to be in all honors classes because that was going to be too hard. But after experience in Georgetown, she was like, no, I want it. Let's go. So she's signing up for honors classes. She's going to work really hard on her SATs and, try to apply to some of those long shot, high-end universities and hope that they give her some kind of money. But it's a long shot, but I want to encourage her as much as possible to dream, but also be realistic. You're going to have to do well. So there you go. That was that. We had a great time. I had a great time with Glenn Kirshner. I saw Bill Boyle. There were protests there over the weekend, voting rights protests, and black voters, Black Lives Matter, and all these great organizations were there. And I didn't even know that until late last night. I don't know how I missed that. I would have loved to have been part of that. And the other thing I wanted to share with you about D.C. was that I had an Uber driver who was Afghan, and he was a former interpreter. for the Army and the Marines in Afghanistan, and an amazing conversation. I taped it. I asked him if I could tape it, and he said, yeah, I don't know how good the audio is, so I got to check that out and share it later this week, or I'll just call him, and I got his number, and we'll have a conversation. But fascinating conversation with this guy. You know, there are people from all over the world, of course, in Washington, D.C. Such a fascinating town. I always love it. And so those are just a few things that happened. I hope that you had a great weekend. If you are in the eye of this hurricane, I hope you are safe. Thinking of Jason in Louisiana and a whole bunch of others. Barksdale Hortenstein Jr., he and his family got out of there. They live right in New Orleans. And so, yeah, that's the big news, of course. So lots to talk about. And I want to get to the news. Headlines galore. Let's hit the last 24. Legendary actor and activist Ed Asner passed away at age 91. Negotiations and assassinations, as well as evacuations, continue in Afghanistan. And a horrific hurricane has hit the Gulf Coast. And here is a little bit of the sound. The Atlantic hurricane season began Tuesday, June 1st, ends Tuesday, November 30th. And the National Hurricane Center said that this hurricane was absolutely horrific in terms of its power. I read this morning one person only has died, but it made landfall Sunday in Louisiana, slammed into the state with 150-mile-per-hour winds after intensifying over the very warm waters. The Gulf of Mexico, power out in New Orleans. I'm talking on Monday morning, so I'm not sure exactly when you're listening and what the latest is, but the hurricane tied the record for the most powerful hurricane to hammer Louisiana, equaling the strength of last year's Hurricane Laura and the last island hurricane of 1856. Here's Al Roker in the streets of Louisiana being hilarious.
How long?
Yeah, look. It's one of these things, and folks on Twitter have been, well, first of all, why is NBC putting him out there? I volunteered to come out here. This is what I do. I've done this for 40 years. Our crews, and we all make sure we're safe. We're not going to do something that's going to put ourselves at harm's way. Right. As much as I love the weather and I love NBC, I'm not going to risk my life for it. Secondly, a number of people, well, he's too old to be doing this. Well, hey, guess what? Screw you, okay? Try to keep up. Keep up. Okay? So
Al Roker.
These young punks. I will come after them. I will drop them like a bag of dirt.
Al Roker, bless you. You have given me a reason to guffaw this morning.
There you go. Jonathan Capehart always trying to keep it pretty buttoned up with a real hackle of a laugh at Al Roker, and I don't blame him. That's awesome. I actually had tweeted. I hope he wasn't talking about me piling on, because I tweeted that NBC has to get Roker out of there. Love him, and we go back a bit. He wrote me a really sweet email after my contract at Sirius ended. Okay, lots, though, to talk about in addition to the hurricane, which I hope you're okay down there, folks, if you're listening, and send us your own listener dispatches and updates about the damage, the strength, your concerns for the future. But let's talk about Afghanistan and COVID. I've got some clips for you there. Here is first Senator Chris Murphy, who I like quite a bit. Smart guy. Here he is on CNN's State of the Union yesterday with Jake Tapper.
And listen, remember, we sent out an APB to American citizens beginning in the spring that they should all leave. We implored U.S. citizens to get out, knowing that there was going to be enormous risk. But your point is that Congress needs to do a full scope investigation of what has gone wrong. My contention is that there is probably no way for the Afghan security forces and the government to collapse overnight, and there not to have been a corresponding chaos on the ground and the scenes that you are seeing, and an opportunity for ISIS-K to be able to make this kind of fatal mischief. When Congress does this oversight, I want to make sure that it's over the last 20 years, not just the last 2 months, because to believe that there was some way to do this evacuation in a way that didn't have panic on the ground, that didn't have a risk of loss of life, I think is the same kind of fantasy thinking that led us to stay in Afghanistan for 10 years too long, even when we knew the Afghan forces couldn't stand up for themselves.
I don't.
And listen, remember,
Senator Chris Murphy on CNN, where Jake Tapper has been, in my opinion, more wrong than he's ever been. And I think that's partially because he's so personally involved. He has such personal stake in Afghanistan. He wrote a book about it, which has made a screenplay about it. He went there and embedded for it. And I like Jake a lot. I've got a lot of respect for him for a lot of different reasons. I think he's one of the best in cable news. But I think he's getting this wrong in different ways. And I still tend to trust the people who predicted what would happen if we did such things, predicted what would happen if we doubled, tripled, quadrupled down on the missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. And where are those voices? They're always here on Stand Up with Pete Dominic. But in corporate media, on the Sunday shows especially, much less the rest of the shows even, I mean, I've heard from John Bolton. I've heard from H.R. McMaster. And, oh, God, Lindsey Graham. So many more of these people, these hawks, these war hawks, these idiots, they have the worst guys because they all have blood on their hands. You want to blame somebody for Afghanistan. These are the guys to blame. And also blame the media and the major networks that keep bringing them on to have them make more awful analysis and get it wrong. It's just it's reprehensible. And I tweeted about this yesterday, about CBS and about NBC and their Sunday shows having these guys on. But I mean, there are people. I've already had Dave Rothkopf and Aaron David Miller. I've talked to so many veterans that are against these wars, of course, but I've talked over the years to Andrew Basevich, and there's a guy named Robert Ryder who I just heard and have started reading, and so many more who predicted these things. I mean, if you listen to Democracy Now!, which is basically an anti-war news show, if you listen to those experts, I mean, Chomsky, they all predicted all of these things would happen, except all of them happen, for the most case, far worse than they even predicted, in my mind. So we've heard from too many of the wrongest people ever. Speaking of the wrongest people and COVID, more dead media stars, radio stars, local radio folks that have been warning against masks and vaccines. A conservative Florida radio host who spoke out against COVID-19 vaccines died after a weeks-long fight with the virus, marking the third radio personality to die from coronavirus who publicly rejected vaccines. This guy's name is Mark Bernier. He was 65. He's a mainstay on talk radio in Daytona, Florida, and the network announced Saturday night that he was dead of COVID. And the pandemic's wrongest man is off of Twitter. Alex Berenson is this guy's name. You may or may not know him, but The Atlantic, my friend Derek Thompson wrote this great article titled The Pandemic's Wrongest Man, I think it was. And that stuck to this guy, Alex Berenson. So he got removed from Twitter for just constantly giving out erroneous advice. According to NBC senior reporter Ben Collins, a Twitter spokesperson told him that Berenson's account was permanently suspended for repeated violations of our COVID-19 misinformation rules. And here's all you need to know about ivermectin? Invermectin? Doesn't know. Doesn't matter how it's pronounced. Hydroxychloroquine. Yeah, they're hard to pronounce, and you don't really need to learn to pronounce them unless you're arguing with the fool. Sorry, but here's all you need to know about ivermectin. The maker of ivermectin is telling you not to take it. Think of it. Have you ever heard of a drug company having to put out a PSA or a constant campaign of PSAs telling you not to take their drug for COVID-19? That's all you need to know. So tell your friends and your crazy Facebook friends and whatever and post it everywhere. The drug maker is telling you not to take the drug. That means don't. Yeah, so the problem, of course, is there are people in major media outlets. I mentioned these talk radio people with huge audience, influencers, leaders, opinion makers that are giving all kinds of crazy information, from conspiracy theories to just straight up lying to just ignorance to I don't know how you want to call it, but it's turning the country against itself. I mean, here's the headline at the Associated Press. Hostile school board meetings have members calling it quits. I told you Thursday night I went to the school board meeting, and there were people there talking about ivermectin. There were anti-mask people there, which is debatable. Listen, I think the mask thing in schools for high schools, maybe it's worth debating. I don't know exactly what the studies say and what the risk is, But with the Delta variant, I'm not sure we really know. And so I say better safe than sorry. But there's no debate on the vaccine in most of these protocols. But I mean, the first sentence in this AP News story, a Nevada school board member said he had thoughts of suicide before stepping down amid threats and harassment. In Virginia, a board member resigned over what she saw as politics driving decisions on masks. The vitriol at board meetings in Wisconsin, and one board member fearing he would find his tires slashed. Yes, that's how bad it is in school districts and towns all across America. And I'm still shaking from last Thursday night when I got shouted down for trying to talk in support of science. It was wild. I was not expecting that. Not to mention I went up to make comments about the issue regarding diversity and inclusion and teaching race and history and what their concern is about critical race theory, which isn't being taught. But when I went up for that, I said, don't talk to the entire audience. I looked at them and said, don't say anything when I'm talking. And then they didn't, which felt good. And I posted that very inarticulate but passionate message so you can hear that. We'll be talking more about that with guests on the show this week. What to say at your school board. Talking with Tim Wise about that today, as a matter of fact. But here is Dr. Anthony Fauci on CNN saying it's going to be time to mandate vaccines for kids who are old enough to take them.
School district in California became the first public school district in the U.S. to require vaccinations, not only for teachers and staff, but also for eligible students who are 12 and over. Now that the vaccine has full approval from the FDA, the Pfizer vaccine, would you like to see it mandated for students elsewhere in the U.S.? And once it's approved for kids under 12, should it be mandated for them too?
You know, I know that a lot of people will be pushing back against that, but if you get the imprimatur about the safety and the strong benefit-risk ratio for the children, when that gets established, which I believe it certainly will, by the FDA and the ACIP, I believe that mandating vaccines for children to appear in school is a good idea. And remember, Jake, this is not something new. We have mandates in many places in schools, particularly public schools, that if in fact you want a child to come in, we've done this for decades and decades, requiring polio, measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis. So this would not be something new, requiring vaccinations for children to come to school.
And that is what's necessary. I was really happy to hear him say that. Yeah, you don't have to vaccinate your kids, but if you want to send them to school, you do have to vaccinate your kids so you don't get my kids sick or my kids and then my grandparents sick. You get it? And of course, Dr. Aaron Carroll wrote a piece about that for the New York Times a few weeks ago, that mandates for vaccines is the thing. Let's stop arguing about the masks and start arguing more about mandates for vaccines, or not arguing. Let's just do it because we already have them for so many other issues, and they are public health miracles. So let's go. And here's stupid Mitch McConnell, who is right once a year, or when it comes to the disease vaccines. You know, this is where Mitch McConnell is actually taking a stand on being pro-vaccine. Wow, what a risk, especially coming from a guy who had his life saved because of a vaccine. He had polio when he was a kid. Here is Mitch McConnell on Fox News with Chris Wallace.
Very active on the issue of COVID, pushing vaccines. You've even taken some of your campaign funds to do public service announcement. The highest number of new COVID cases right now are in Florida and Texas, where two Republican governors have banned mask mandates in schools and other places. Do you think that Governor DeSantis and Governor Abbott are making a mistake banning individual institutions, school districts, from imposing mask mandates?
You know, I'm kind of reluctant to give governors advice about how they ought to carry out their responsibilities during the pandemic, but I do think it's important to remember that 90% of the people in the hospitals are unvaccinated. So the answer to this is get vaccinated. If we could keep saying that over and over and over again, I think that's the key to this. This is a crisis among unvaccinated Americans who seem to be reluctant to believe that vaccination works. It does.
And it's not just unvaccinated Americans. I mean, a lot of people who are vaccinated are still getting sick, and some getting really sick. They're not being very likely being hospitalized, much less dying, but they're still getting sick and missing work and affecting other people and affecting plans. And so it's a serious issue. And that's why we all have to be vaccinated, not just some of us. All right, let me pull the curtain back a little bit for you here on today's podcast, which is I got home late, really late on Sunday night, and was just no way I could get it done. I warned you, I told you on Friday, I might not even be able to do a show today, but I do really want to share my interviews with Anushay and Mike Hayes on today's episode of the podcast. So I'm going to wrap up the audio there, the news, do a quick news dump and get to them now. So here's a whole bunch of other headlines from the weekend I think are important, I wanted to mention, and that's what the news dump is for. Rapid fire headlines. Take it away, Pete Coe.
Realtor showing houses, random goat is in a huff. The realtor flees in terror on today's news dump.
And here is the master bedroom. Oh my God, there's a goat in the bathroom. That is, I think, inspired by an actual headline, as often the news dump jingles are. Now let's get to some of those headlines. At this point, you've probably heard most of the headlines surrounding Hurricane Ida, with 1.1 million people without electricity, apparently. Over 1 million people without electricity Sunday going into Monday. Flash flood emergencies. Like I said, you've probably heard most of these headlines. But did you hear the rest of the climate and weather-related headlines? I saw this from Brian Kahn at Earther. A non-exhausted list of North American catastrophes right now. Multiple megafires from BC to California, including one threatening Lake Tahoe, major hurricane hitting the Gulf Coast, major fire in Minnesota, ! Hurricane raking the west coast of Mexico as well. So it wasn't just Hurricane Ida, but of course she got most of the attention. I called her she. I actually don't know what her pronouns are. They, Hurricane Ida. Okay, so here's a much more important. Here's a completely unimportant headline that will take your mind off of the last headline, and that is that Wendy's, the fast food chain, is giving their French fries what they're calling a COVID-era makeover, a fry that retains more heat and keeps its crispiness longer compared to its predecessor. CNN Business says the upgraded fry, which will be available nationwide by mid-September, was created as more people shift their ordering preferences to drive-thrus and delivery because of the pandemic. So, what is this? Some kind of GMO'd fry that stays crispy longer? Listen, unless you're McDonald's or Five Guys, let's not even talk about fries, because Wendy's and Burger King are terrible. I mean, I'll eat any French fry, but I think the latter two really haven't figured it out. Just put some seasoning salt on them, for God's sakes. Okay, moving on to something more important. Apparently, the North Koreans have resumed their nuclear reactor operations because they were like, you know what? America is tearing itself apart at school board meetings over myths, as well as over myths of misinformation on COVID and the vaccines. They've got all kinds of weather-related problems, climate change issues. They got a hurricane. They're fighting. Let's start the nuke reactor back up. Oh, did I mention Afghanistan? They have this horrible chaos in Afghanistan. Perfect time for us to restart the nuclear reactor. No victims in a Milan, Italy, 20-story building blaze. That's a really good story. So, horrible shit happens, but if nobody loses their life in something like this, I don't know if you saw the pictures, but like every floor is on fire, but apparently there's no loss of human life, which is amazing. Amazing good news. A mountain lion was killed after attacking a child. Do I smell a news dump? We can do this because the child didn't die, but a mountain lion attacked a 5-year-old boy in Southern California, but he was shot by a wildlife officer. So, how about this headline from Cape Canaveral, Florida? A SpaceX shipment of ants, avocados, and a human-sized robotic arm rocketed toward the International Space Station on Sunday. The delivery due to arrive today is the company's 23rd for NASA in just under a decade. I mean, I understand why they want to eat avocados and why they might need a human-sized robotic arm, but what are they doing with those ants? Wouldn't want to see them get out in the space station. Imagine if you just saw an ant or any bug on a space station and immediately killed it out of habit. You're like, oh my God, no, I needed that ant. All right, an interesting story coming out of Virginia where the school board that fought a former student for years has to agree to settle. The student is trans, born biologically female, identifies now as a male. And why that's important to the story is that he spent 6 years with the ACLU fighting a ruling that forced him to use a private bathroom or the girls' room. And so he sued. And the Supreme Court declined to hear it. And now the Gloucester County School Board is going to have to turn over $1.3 million to cover attorney's fees after effectively losing their case, according to the Washington Post. I thought that was a really interesting story as well. And now you don't have to listen to any right-wing radio show because that's all they are going to talk about, because this is something that really works to divide people and to get ratings and to sell advertising. This issue of trans people, a wider conversation, but using a bathroom, really? Who cares? Well, I'll tell you who cares about this one. The RFK's kids, Robert F. Kennedy's kids, are divided. 6 of them are against their father's assassin being granted parole, and 2 of them are okay with it. But a very interesting story. Sirhan was granted parole. I guess it was on Friday, and now all of his kids are kind of divided over it. I did think it was interesting to see that news, and interesting to see how those kids might be, or anybody's kids or relatives might be divided over someone who killed their loved one, either on purpose or by accident, being freed like this. A lot to say about that. Interesting issue. All right, that's all the news I've got for you for Monday, August 30th. I really hope that you are doing okay. Hope to see you this Thursday at our happy hour hangout. Hope to hear from you anytime. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. And now it's time to get to my guest interviews. Joining me later on is the former commander of SEAL Team 2. Coming up next, Mike Hayes and I sat down to talk about Afghanistan and more. Second time he joined me on the show. And I think this is my first guest's third time? I don't know, but we love talking, and every time she joins me, lots of listeners weigh in and say they really enjoy the conversation. She's a writer. She's a feminist policy analyst, focuses a lot on women's health legislation, has an awesome new book coming out soon called The Pain Gap, How Sexism and Racism in Healthcare Kill Women. That is coming out soon, and I'll be very excited to help her promote that. She is a journalist. She is a very educated woman, speaks 5 languages, and we always have great conversations. We talked a lot about Afghanistan, and I think I turned her around a little bit on a couple of these opinions. I gave her a little bit more of my insight, and usually it's the guest giving me a lot and changing mine, but it's always a give and take with Anushay, and I love talking to her. I've learned so much from talking to her. So let's do it right now, shall we? On Twitter, by the way, let her know. She'll see your tweets, and you guys have been so good with letting guests know, especially when they're on the first time, much less really active on Twitter. At Anushay Hossain. Go find that in the show notes and everything else about her. Let's do it.
Hi.
Yay!
Oh, is this going to be video?
I'm doing video now as much as I can, but if you,
Lord.
I don't have to use it at all. So don't even think about it.
Okay, great. Well, you know what? Pandemic mom chic.
You look terrible. What happened?
You look really good. What the heck, Pete?
Wearing one of my finest t-shirts from Marshall's. I'm tan. I went to Mexico.
Yes, your pictures looked amazing.
Oh, you saw?
I had such FOMO.
Oh,
you know FOMO, fear of missing out?
Yes. I thought you. Yeah, I was. It's what I loved about the pandemic, not having it.
Yeah.
Never had to worry about what anybody else was doing because they were doing nothing.
Well, it went from FOMO to JOMO, the joy of missing out.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it did for me. I don't know. I like it.
But I have serious weird issues with FOMO. Like I'll see J-Lo and Ben Affleck on their yacht. And I'm like, why did they not call me? Or why are the Clooney's in Como and they didn't ping me? So
I just wish people would post more of the mundane things they're doing, or just the having an anxiety attack. If you can capture that and post it. But usually, social media, I've always said, is is what you
Only
want.
for the good things.
But yeah, you want people to think this is what your life is. When in reality, if you really want to know about someone's life, check their internet history.
Yep.
You're Googling about that bump on your arm.
Yes. Or
you're shopping for, bullshit.
Oh gosh. Well, I feel like more people are doing that. My friend yesterday posted a picture of her 9-year-old son who's going through chemo. And I mean, that was I feel like the real posts, right? Like about the real things in life are so much more powerful than, on the Amalfi Coast with. They
are. But then there's this pitfall there too. It's like, that's the kind of the problem with social media, is that it usually makes you feel pretty badly. And what I mean is, even if we all posted nothing but vacation photos and success graduations and promotions and whatever, you're scrolling through and it's like, oh, that's great. Oh, that's great. And then someone's like, my dad died yesterday. And like, now my hour is ruined. Like, I'm so sad. This is a friend, someone I know. And now I've got to feel really upset. I have to now. I can't be happy about anything else.
No-win situation. Yeah, that's true. It's such a weird thing to have. I mean, remember, we can still talk about the world before. I mean, I had to bring out an album the other day, a really old album for my first job after college, which was like in 2003, because I used to work so much on the Afghanistan issue. And I actually used to work on part of a Nobel Peace Prize nominated campaign for Afghan women and girls. And I was just going through pictures like, wow, like in an actual album.
Oh, wow. I didn't know you did all that. I saw your piece in Medium.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. But before we get too serious, and I've been recording. Are you good?
Yeah, I'm great. I hope I don't scare your...
There's like 3 people, and you're one of them, where I'm just like, just as soon as they show up, I want to record. But
yes, everybody loves our conversations. Yeah. I love it.
And
Isn't it such a hit, Pete?
I was actually about to say we've never met in person, but we have, and it was almost when I remember meeting you. Yes, I remember meeting you in person a couple times, and both times I think we were literally walking past each other. I was walking off the 8 o'clock hour, and you were walking on the 9 o'clock hour on the set at MSNBC.
And I think it was like one of the last shows that he did, because I remember I passed by you guys and he was telling you that the show had been canceled.
Yeah. David Gura, he's at NPR now. He's doing all right.
Yeah, so worse things could happen. He was great though. He went to Columbia with one of my best friends from college, so he is a great guy.
Yeah, he assembled that show assembled a great panel of people, and those people like you and I are still talking for sure. So yeah, I want to talk, of course, about Afghanistan with you. But before we get too serious, well, the whole thing can probably be serious, because I'm thinking about the other issues that we have to talk about. But I did want to talk about like school and going back to school and our kids and COVID, and your kids are younger than mine, so they're not vaccinated, and so. That's so much different than my concern, meaning I'm still concerned, but more for other people than for my family and my kids. Although, I'm slightly concerned, but my daughters are both, almost 14 and 16. We're all 4 of us are vaccinated. They're going to be wearing masks. That's a different story than it is for you guys. Yeah.
You are so lucky that your kids are vaccinated. And, I'm so lucky because I live in this like upper Northwest DC bubble. My daughter's school has mask mandate, all their teachers are vaccinated, but we don't know anything about this variant. And I just feel like, are we sending them to school and crossing our fingers? And, everyone's coming back from summer break. So my heart breaks for all women. And then it infuriates me because I feel like, we all did, but really women and mothers carried this pandemic on our backs last year. Yeah. And then again, now you're just asking us to send in our kids and hope for the best. And I fear for the worst. I mean, my eldest is 10. She's going to be 10 in 2 weeks. And my youngest is 4. We held her back from school last year. And my husband just the other day was like, I don't know if I want them going inside a school building. And I was like, I don't know either, but I don't know if we should. I don't know.
Not that you're going to, share this part of it, but that's like, we in relationships, we try to argue only about the big things. Would you rather be happy or be right? I think a lot of times in terms of my relationship with my wife about things like, do I really want to argue about this? But that is a legitimately important discussion to have, one of many, about do we send our kids back? And I'm just imagining not being quite on the same page with your partner is really a struggle. And I just feel so bad for people that have to kind of make that decision. I have friends who are not sending their kids back to school, but to be fair, they live in some of those more hotbed areas than you do. But it's still whatever. Like, I'm not judging anybody.
Everywhere, yeah. Well, you know what? I feel like my husband might be right, but I also am like, I don't know. I mean, who knows? Who knows? But I feel like you also want
your freedom back.
No, it's not so much. We didn't send them to camp this summer, so we have been, home with the kids. It's not even about wanting them to get out. I'm actually more worried about my younger one, who's 4. She's a pandemic toddler. She needs to go to school and interact with some children. Yeah. Otherwise, she's going to just become a bigger diva than she already is. She's like, the whole world and the whole day is about me.
She's going to be around you and your husband so much, she's going to skip childhood and become an intellectual.
You know what? You're probably right. And she doesn't like to leave the house. We're always like, let's go to the park or let's go to grandma's. And she's like, no.
She's going to have like these really thoughtful responses like you or your husband would have. She'd be like, well, let's take a look at the pros and cons of the entire situation. If we go to grandmother's, you got to consider we're going to have to deal. It's tough. Yeah, it's really scary, so and it's really frustrating. What are you kind of like most outraged regarding COVID? We can talk about other things, of course, but regarding what you're seeing around the country, what headlines, what statements, what actions or policies are really getting your ire up the most?
I'm from Bangladesh and my family is from Bangladesh. And so many Bengalis who are lucky, who have their visas, are coming to America to get vaccinated and then go back home. And I am so angry. I'm not even angry. I'm like grossed out and disgusted, at so many Americans who don't want to get vaccinated. I mean, this is like a pandemic of the unvaccinated now. The rest of the world would die for a vaccine. Yeah. And I mean, I got a prescription for my dad from the GP and just walked into a CVS. Like, I'm not sending my parents back without getting them, the Moderna shot, even though they both got the AstraZeneca, which is the vaccine that was given out in Bangladesh, which we know is not that effective. And then they both got COVID earlier this year in between their vaccinations. And now apparently they have very high antibodies, but I still got them both vaccinated before sending them back.
Well, I'm just lucky
the privilege of being like, I don't know what's in it, but I'm going to do Botox and eat McDonald's. What the hell?
Well, it's even worse. Like the worst one to me are these NFL football players.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Because, like, I don't know if you saw this, but Brett Favre was on CNN.
No, I didn't see it.
It was really a well-intentioned segment in that Brett Favre went on with, like, another, a traumatic brain injury or brain expert doctor, and they were talking with Kate Baldwin about the danger that tackle football, contact sports, tackle football poses to young people. And basically, Brett Favre was like, I don't think you should play football or contact football until you're over 14. That was his message, okay? At the end of the interview, Kate Baldwin asked him about those players who hadn't gotten vaccinated. And Favre is like, she asked him, are you vaccinated? Point blank. And he's like, I don't want to answer that question. And then Hemming and Hawing, you've got these other football players, including, supposed to be the smartest one, the quarterback, saying no. And it's so crazy. You're doing this job, this sport, so dangerous, and you're more worried about a vaccine than an aspirin, which is more dangerous.
Yeah, no, people are really, the lack of intelligence. I had a UVA professor tell me this right before I graduated. She said the most shocking thing about being out in the real world is how dumb people are. And it's so true. At the time, I was like, God, that was harsh, but it's so true. I mean, what are we doing? And also, people are really willing to die. At this point, we know no one has died from taking the vaccine, right? But we know people have died from not taking it.
But don't you think I think it to some extent, it's less about dumb and it lets off the hook those professional people who know better, who are misinforming. So, it's easier to be misinformed if you lack certain resources, critical thinking skills, and education. Those people are more vulnerable to be misinformed, which is why they're preyed upon by these talkers and politicians. So I feel like it's less about them being dumb. I mean, I'm dumb and ignorant about the things I don't know anything about or have somebody I can ask about or read about it. But They're being told by people they trust, most importantly, the former president of the United States.
Yes, we can never forget that, how politicized.
It's not like it's just Alex Jones and Sean Hannity. I mean,
you're right. It was Trump. And for so long, for a good 6-7 months, we were told not to mask. I mean, do we remember that? The president of the United States.
Senator Ron Johnson, tons of Republican congressmen. So if even put Trump aside, so I'm saying they're telling people, and those people are believing them. And I want to blame the people who are misinforming or disinforming.
I do feel like now, I don't know if the government could do anything because I guess it's against your First Amendment rights. But I mean, somebody needs to go on Fox and just be like, you guys cannot spread misinformation anymore. It's literally killing Americans. But I had another really good vaccine point that I just forgot as well.
Another vaccine point, you said?
Yeah.
About people that are not getting it, people that, I don't know. I want anything you have to say about vaccines. I'm trying to.
But all these other guys that are saying not to get vaccinated. I mean, Sean Hannity, Tucker, they're all vaccinated.
Oh yeah, it's mandatory.
That's even worse. Because it makes it so bad. Yeah. They're vaccinated themselves. So I heard something about the Biden administration apparently saying something to Fox News about cutting those talking points in half, or trying not to say it, and it actually increased some some vaccination amongst their audience. But
what is your looking ahead? What are you most concerned about in terms of the pandemic? I mean, and I feel like people are just so. I feel like the people that need our support the most are so exhausted. I don't know if you saw this headline about like Florida doctors and nurses going out.
We did a small little fundraiser for a Florida nurse who's a friend of one of our mom friends, and we each just pitched in because she's just like, everyone here is dying. Like, I don't get to go home. Like, we don't have any food here. We don't have any supplies. Like, it's just terrible that this is happening. But what really frustrates me, Pete, is I was reading something about how we are so traumatized and exhausted from the pandemic last year. We don't even know, we can't even comprehend or fathom what is coming up. But I think what really makes me depressed is that I don't think so, and neither does Dr. Sanjay Gupta. I think that COVID is going to be like polio or smallpox, something that we eradicated, that it's going to be like a flu strain that we're going to just have to adapt and live with. So I don't know, 2024, before there was some kind of a finish line, right? Yeah. First it was 2 weeks. Remember those innocent days? Locked down for 2 weeks. And now, I don't know.
I'm stuck on this point about our culture, and I wonder if you can weigh in on this from, having an understanding of another culture, which most Americans unfortunately don't, which is like, we're just such this individualist strain in our culture, and not worrying about, I think there's a lot of people that they're not necessarily conservative, liberal. This is all over the world, but especially here in America, and definitely on the right more, but they're not as concerned about people they don't know personally. And what I mean, and what's weird to me is when you read about history and you study American history or any country's history, and you look at how a small community, let's say, in reference to a tornado that blew apart some, southern town, or a war, 9/11, Pearl Harbor, or how a country comes together, a city comes together, a community comes together, and what that needs. And it takes so much. People all have to do something. They have to, and Anushay, all people have to do now is they don't have to leave their house. Yeah. I'll bring the shot to you. Join the fight. Be a patriot. Sit there and be vaccinated. And we can't come together to kill the virus. We can't do it.
Can I tell you, even though I've lived here for almost 2 decades, more than 2 decades, the pandemic really exposed that to me. I didn't know this about Americans. I really didn't. I know that the society is capitalist and all about individualism, but I didn't know this. Like, each person for their own, really, all the way, even in a pandemic. Like, I mean, Bangladesh has so many problems. When it was like mask up, everybody masked up. We had a lot of other issues, but nobody was like, I'm not going to wear a mask because it's my right to get you sick. So this is very interesting, but it's also because I think Americans don't live with nearby their families. I think a lot of Americans probably care about their dogs more than they do about their parents. That's wrong? Did I say that out loud?
No, not to certain people listening.
True, right?
Certain people have probably heard that and be like, yeah. But, you know, that made me think of something else just to ask you. Like, I'm obsessed with, and we talked about this on your podcast a bit, and you talk about this a lot, but I'm obsessed with men and masculinity and gender stuff and how it affects us and men's health and men's mental health. And like, part of the masking thing is this, I'm not gonna do it because you're telling me to, which is kind of this masculine thing. It's not exclusive to men. But then the other part of it is it's like it makes me look weak and like a sheep. Yeah. And that, again, that strikes me as fitting to some extent in that category of masculinity, and I'm too tough. And, you know, my joke in my stand-up act is like, well, are we going to tell firemen that they shouldn't use helmets? What are you, a wuss? Got to take that hose in there? Just run in that fire in your underwear. Like, what are you, like, no, the mask protects you and other people. What do you, what's like the culture like in Bangladesh? Or what do you think about this kind of masculinity hang-up regarding the mask itself and being told what to do and all that horse shit?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And, you know, toxic masculinity is real. And this thing about I'm too manly for the mask, I think it was already there, but Trump really took it to another. He really reinforced and lived that message. We have toxic masculinities everywhere. It's not unique to America. We have toxic masculinity in Bangladesh, too. But the mask was not gendered and branded like that. I mean, Trump is... You know, I had to debate toxic masculinity with Tucker Carlson.
Oh, God, yeah,
so
that's right.
I'm a little traumatized. But him and Trump are really embody it. So it's very problematic. It's very problematic.
I got called a beta.
Oh, God, by who?
Guy on Twitter calls me a beta. And is that supposed to be an insult? I DM'd him and told him to call me, and we recorded an hour-long conversation.
Really? How did it go?
Good. He's really worried about what's happening to men in America. And so it went, as you can imagine. Well, I asked him a bunch of questions. Like, I tried to get to the root of those concerns. I think it's really important and fascinating to try to understand why men are scared of losing that kind of stuff. So it was interesting from that standpoint. Speaking of... It is
really interesting because, you know, when you're growing up kind of outside of America, you really are kind of told and you believe that America is like this feminist utopia. But of course, living here and doing the work that I do, I really know now, like America has really, our culture has really problems with women in positions of power. Any advancement of women really threatening like white men. It's very interesting. I feel like in the past 5 or 10 years have really come onto the surface. And, you know, a lot of it we can thank Trump for, but it was obviously bubbling there. I used to think that I got a lot of it because I was a brown woman, a Muslim woman, but I think it's just a problem with the woman. It explains why look what happened when Hillary Clinton was running. I mean, you know, toxic masculinity came out in full force. She has her own issues. She was not a perfect candidate, but some of the things people attacked her for, men attacked her for, I would never expect to hear.
I feel like a better example, and there's unfortunately a billion, but Elizabeth Warren, even progressive men, you know, the Bernie bros going after her. I'll never forget the day.
The Bernie bros.
Where I was, where I was the day I remember like reading this on Twitter. I shouldn't have been looking at my phone. I just remember being so shocked by it, but like a lot of Bernie supporters calling her a snake. I'm like, oh, that's a lady insult right there. That's what you call. And there was, you know, that was just,
We see it with Kamala Harris. We see it really tough with her. Although she is becoming a very, very interesting. I mean, I don't know. I was expecting to see a lot more of her and a lot more from her, but I guess it's only been a couple of months. But where's Kamala paging the VP?
I don't know about her in this role. It looked great on paper, but it's like it may not be enough of what she needs, or it might not. Maybe they're not jiving well. I don't know. I mean, like, you know, the whole. If we're going to do raw politics, the vice president is always based. You know, it's chosen in huge part to help that person, you know, run for president. It's the best thing you can do. And I don't know. I think maybe Democrats are worried that maybe she's not the best person to take over, and they're lowering her profile to some extent. I can't imagine. I have no idea. I always liked her.
I always liked her, and I felt like she was such a charming and charismatic candidate. But, I've written about her a little bit, and I feel like, a part of me is like she was kind of set up. They gave her portfolio as like root causes of immigration, not even border crisis. Like go all the way back to Latin America, and then voting rights, and then she kind of fumbled on both, but they're insane.
Yeah, they're like, can you solve the border by Tuesday? She's like, what?
I wrote about this. People really expected her to resolve the border crisis like overnight. And for Republicans, you can just do a photo op there and people are like, he has resolved the border crisis. So it was so hypocritical, but so mean. So a part of me is like, was she set up by the administration? Biden knows he can't run again.
You're so sure.
Yes, I've been told. He told me. I'm kidding. Don't quote that. I am kidding. That was not serious. But no, isn't that the word on the street? He is apparently too old. He is not going to be able to run like another campaign. But you're right. He's not really giving that backing or support that you would to your number two. Remember Bush and Cheney? I guess Cheney
don't do that to her. Don't do that to her.
No, but Cheney was the real president, actually.
Yeah, but that was the agreement, like Joe Biden didn't agree with Kamala Harris to be like, I'll do whatever you say, boss. He basically. No,
he did not. But Bush, we'll see. I was reading today that her current trip overseas in East Asia is going really well. And I was like, she's overseas? I don't think that's been covered in the American press.
It's interesting. I always criticize people, and I say this myself. I just said it in my last interview, saying I don't think it's been covered because the truth is, what is your intake of media? And the person on the plane with Kamala Harris, the reporter in the pool, is saying, "I'm covering it. It's not. You're not reading it." And so, I think the COVID in Afghanistan. And this has been the truth of COVID the whole time. It's COVID and whatever the other thing is. Afghanistan is a legitimately huge issue to be covering. And so, the resources that newsrooms, much less anybody else, are giving to anything else besides COVID. And my point, the thing I said got undercovered, and I want to get your take on this, was a guy pulled up in a pickup truck and threatened to blow up D.C. unless they reinstated Trump. And 5 hours later, no one was talking about that dude. And they were saying, he was disturbed. We're not sure. The media that was reporting was, we're not sure what he wanted. He had a fucking manifesto. He was Facebook Living what he wanted.
I know. And I think another really weird thing about American news is it's one thing at a time. Yeah. One headline at a time. You go to the rest of the world, like CNN International is amazing. When I'm in Bangladesh, I love to consume our cable news because it's so good and so international. And we have BBC International, CNN International, you have Al-Jazeera, you have France.
Yeah, but they all have those. They're all covering those. I think what you're maybe saying is it's like, it's what we want. So the New York Times has, A through A17 every day filled with articles and really.
No one is really. There's very few people. I know people read cover to cover New York Times, but really, people are just looking. Most people just want the headlines.
It's it's our fault and how we synthesize it, especially in social media, especially people like you and me. And it's like, this is what I'm talking about, and you try to talk about things that are maybe undercovered and be important. And then we're even discouraged, not necessarily, I'm going to go tweet this. And then it's like, that got one like. No one cared. No one cared. Granted, I was talking about my own vasectomy experience, but that's neither here nor there, Anushay. That's neither here nor there. I was just advocating for it.
No, but it's true. It's true. It's so funny because I had so much to say on Afghanistan, and then I didn't want to say anything. I tweeted something out the other day just about how traumatic this is for me because I feel like it's like deja vu. Yeah. From, twice over. So let's get 96 and 2001, and no one responded. And I was like, gosh, no one really cares. I'm going to write about it.
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about it. Here's the thing. You in an amazing rant on CNN the other day talked about, do we care about women or not? Basically, I'm paraphrasing. And I'm yelling at you. I'm like, no, we don't. We haven't, and we don't. And we show that in so many ways. But let's stick with Afghanistan because this is where you're an expert and you spend a lot of time and have a great piece of Medium about it, which is, I remember learning about the Taliban through Mavis Leno at the Feminist Majority Foundation. I've always been interested in women's rights issues, and so I've always kind of tacitly looked at the headlines and studied and read some books and stuff, and so the Taliban was. She was, Jay Leno's wife, Mavis Leno, was trying to bring as much attention and funding to the fact that all these women are walking around, this is the least of it probably, in these suits covering their entire bodies. And so that was pre 9/11. We weren't, Mavis Leno was like leading against the Taliban. The State Department, whatever their desk in Afghanistan, it was like one guy like Dwight Schrute. And, he was a leftover, or Michael Scheuer, somebody left over from, the Soviet invasion and occupation. And so after 9/11, we started paying attention, but women's rights still became just almost like we used that. And So you take over from there. What's your experience there? First of all, what did you do back in the late 90s?
It was the early 2000s, but Mavis Leno actually chaired the campaign that I worked for. It was the Feminist Majority Foundation's Nobel Peace Prize nominated campaign for Afghan women and girls. And just like you said, like way before, they were doing this in the 90s. I went to work for them after 9/11. But this is the crazy thing, because I grew up in Bangladesh and in 1996, I was 16 years old. Like, I remember the Taliban when they took over Afghanistan vividly. And we were terrified because it was like doctors, engineers, all of a sudden covered in this burqa. And the burqa really was the least of their worries. They weren't allowed to work. They weren't allowed to leave. They were like
dance, sing, listen to music.
Walk behind a man, so many of these things. And I just remember being like, oh my God, is this going to happen here? Like, Afghanistan is pretty close. And then that was it. And you never heard about the Taliban again until 2001 after 9/11. And it was once again the plight of Afghan women, that was exploited and used to garner, public support for this war, for this invasion, to win the PR and optics battle. And I know this because I worked on a campaign that relied on it. We needed those images out there because we had a really great window to do some really great work. And I write about this in my Medium piece, that here we are now again. And I am anticipating a massacre of women and girls at the very least. And what I want to say is, and what I ask in my piece is, what are we telling women and girls around the world, America and its allies, that we don't give a shit about women's rights? It became from all about women's rights to getting Americans the hell out of there. Those Afghans running on that airplane, what do you call it? Termite? I keep on calling it tarmac.
The tarmac.
Yes, I mispronounced it yesterday on CNN too.
No.
So my friends always make fun of me. They're like, Anushay sounds completely American. Every now and then she'll say something and you're like, oh. And I could not, I was like, tarmac. Anyway, the fucking airline, whatever you call it, the runway, and trying to grab onto that U.S. Air Force plane and the Afghans falling off. And, somebody said to me, well, who would do that? And I said, I would. If I was a woman in Afghanistan, I would run after that plane. And now people can't even get into the airport. And I have such great American friends here in D.C. who have been working in Afghanistan for years. One of my friends works for the United States Institute of Peace. He has 48 Afghan staffers. Most of them have their visas. They can't get the hell out. He got 2 of his female staffers out. But you work for the U.S. and now the Taliban apparently got the U.S. equipment. They know who were the translators. These people are going to be killed. They have the biggest target on their heads. And we know who the Taliban are. People, I'm terrified. If the if the Biden administration recognizes this government or accepts a deal, Pete, that does, I don't know. I don't know what to tell my daughters.
Well,
I don't know if we live in a country where that's okay.
Pre 9/11, I don't think the U.S. government recognized the Taliban as legitimate.
No, and it was because of their treatment of women and girls, and because of this campaign led by the Feminist Majority. Yeah. It stopped the U.S. and the UN from recognizing the Taliban government. And don't forget, then they had a huge pipeline deal going on. That was Unical and the natural gas in Afghanistan. Let's not forget. So back then, the slogan was "No women for oil."
That's a really important point. I remember reading about that specifically because, speaking of words, I was like, how is Unical pronounced? Is it unlocal? I remember reading that. And Steve Cole's great book, Descent into Chaos, was Steve Cole or Ahmed Rashid? But either way, I remember.
Ahmed Rashid. I have his book, Taliban. Okay, so I have to tell your viewers, I'm sure they know, your listeners, but Pete is the only one that can get my laugh out loud and then get it on recorded.
On local? Yes.
True, man, unilocal.
I just remember really struggling with that word for a while.
Well, what was the other word for it? Because oh my God, Dick Cheney was all over this. They were all over Iraq as well. They had another name, though. I think it was Unical, and then they had a subsidiary company called Kellogg Brown and something. KBR.
I think is what
Brown and Root.
I think you're right about that. Yeah, the contractors. Well, that's probably like, it's hard to connect the dots, and it's hard to make these cases. And I try not to be so cynical to make people listening think that it's this kind of corrupt, but it kind of is. Like the war in Afghanistan, there was never any argument after bin Laden was killed. That argument was over, and it was probably the worst thing Obama did.
He had said it, though. It would have been better to been listen, we got our target, and I'm really sorry about the women, and whoever can get out, get out.
Why?
But now we're not even getting like the translators who helped Americans. They're on the ground for the last 2 decades. I mean, they're definitely going to be killed. You were working with the Americans, and now you're abandoned in Taliban, Afghanistan. I don't think so. Like, I have nightmares about these people.
Well, I feel like, I wonder if I just got done talking to Dave Rothkopf, and a lot of people, Dave is making the point that, and I wonder what you think of this, that this is the biggest airlift that has ever happened. 100,000 people by the time this airs probably will have been. And so I feel like maybe you're not giving enough credit to one of the greatest humanitarian efforts ever.
Yes, that's true. No. You're right. You're right.
Because
there's been a lot of women who have been delivering on these flights, Afghan women, and handing their babies to U.S. soldiers. Of course, there's always these stories. But this was a really botched withdrawal.
I feel like
it's going to get worse.
I feel like watching this and paying attention to this as long as I have, I feel like, and then thinking about media and arguments and passion and someone like yourself and me and having this empathy for people, it's like we are going to have nightmare stories about those who got left behind. That's what happens when you lose a war. You can't make it look like you won. Horror occurs. And so you're going to have these stories. And all I want to say is, let's not overplay these. Let's make sure we tell these stories of anybody who gets left behind. But let's also tell the stories of the people resettle. And let's work to advocate against those Americans right now who are warning about Afghan refugees more than they are about COVID.
Yes. You know what? Bless you. That is an excellent, excellent point. But you know what is also interesting is that we can't have it both ways, because America, prior to this withdrawal, which, by the way, wasn't a date that, Biden chose. It's been on the books since the Trump administration. But I'm not going to forget my point about people leaving and about.
Well, these people. Well, the bottom line to me is, this war was horrific.
Oh, sorry. I remember my point. Was that prior, apparently, I was reading about how the withdrawal has been happening since May, that America wanted a media blackout because we have lost the war. This hasn't been articulated. You're right. When you lose a war, it looks like this. The images are very similar. Why do you think people are comparing to Vietnam? Right?
Well, I think part of
Americans getting the hell out.
You're forcing me to defend the administration again, too, which I think that they wanted a media blackout to some extent because if images were seen of people running out of there, it would have been what it is. It was always going to be this way. As soon as, especially in a country and culture like Afghanistan, or frankly, any small town in America or small village in the world, if you hear that there's a plane going, you grab your family and you go. And that's why they didn't want the imagery, because it would have been more chaotic sooner. It was always going to be this way. With this many people knowing what's going to happen, it's like you could say, I don't know what's going to happen when Taliban takes over. But no, history tells us the people that are over 20 know exactly what happens when the Taliban takes over, which is why there was a rush to this airport. But I'm saying, Anushay, that was always going to happen. So if they said, your time is now, everybody is going to run an airport and be as desperate as we have seen them be.
No, you're right. And I write this in my piece. I'm like, maybe I was the naive one. And, people have also gotten in touch with me, viewers and readers have been like, we can't stay there forever. We can't save every Afghan. And I'm like, I know, I'm not saying that.
Your impression of your readers and viewers is, who is this lady?
My girls.
She's in.
It's true.
I live in Sheboygan, and I'm telling you right now, we have things we need to take care of here at home.
Seriously. And then somebody wrote, oh, yeah, well, you're on TV trying to sell your book. I'm like, what does that have to? I'm going to be doing that a lot more in the next couple of months. I'm like, what does that have to do with what I have to say about Afghanistan? Well, please do pre-order my book, though. It's coming out of
Well, that's a...
but yeah, no, I get it. I'm not saying, everybody come here. I'm just saying, wow, really lip service for 20 years. And it's not just, there are so many good American organizations and international aid organizations that really worked really, really hard. It has really just erased the last 20 years.
I also think that, and this is such a shitty thing for an American, certainly me, sitting in my shed here, to do, but you can't not address the corruption in Afghanistan.
Oh my God. Karzai's brother a couple of years ago was caught with like $1 billion, if I'm remembering this story correctly, $1 billion in cash going to Dubai. I don't even know.
Listen, this guy, what's his name? Ghani? He had like $170 million in like a helicopter and a car. Anushay, I haven't stopped thinking about that screenplay and that, like, what was this guy? Where are you keeping all that money, dude?
Yeah, is he sleep? Is it under the mattress? Is it like Godfather? Go to the mattresses.
It's a room. I don't know. Where do you guys keep a lot of cash in the house? Tell my audience.
No, we don't. You? Is it in your shed?
My wife has all the cash. And I don't know where it is.
He's going to burn your ass when you're in the shed.
I have to ask her for money. Like, I'm like, can I have, because I'm not even allowed to go to ATM. I'm like, can I have $20? And then when I ask for it, I make a joke out of it. Like, I ask what an adolescent would want with $20. I'm like, I just want to go to the arcade. Can I get $20 gas money, please?
Just ask her to Venmo you. Don't you have a card?
Yeah. All right, you got to go?
I texted you and I private chatted you. I don't know if you got to
go? Did you private chat me that you have to leave?
Yeah. No, I private chatted you to take your shirt off.
Well, unfortunately, you have to leave, so you don't get to see my full 45-year-old dad bod.
45? Oh, my goodness. You're just 4 years older than me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I know, Ray. I bet you thought I was in my 20s. People do.
Well, I don't know. Your kids are young, so I think I decide based on that. I make judgments based on the age of people's kids and how old they are. But, yeah. All right. Well, then you should go.
I want to come back again soon and talk about the rest. I love talking politics. I love being on this show.
Yeah. Let's do this. Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, this is actually very true. You are one of the few people that really makes good points. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Usually I'm like, no, dumbass, you're wrong. I'm right. You suck. And thank you. I learn more coming on your show.
It's because I think I care a lot about this issue that you care a lot about. And so I read as much as I can about it because I really want to look at, different viewpoints. And so I shouldn't have said anything. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me, Pete.
All right, Anushay Hossain, everybody. Go say hi to her on Twitter. She'll see it at Anushay Hossain and get pre-order her book. And what else can I tell you? She's awesome. Love talking to her. And again, sorry we didn't get more Quint on, but maybe tomorrow or the next day I'll catch up with her. If not, definitely next week. But I do have another really great guest joining me now. He joined me for the first time a couple of months ago, and then we met up. Actually, I haven't met too many people in person at that point, but he invited me out for coffee. I ended up just going for a walk with him. He lives not too far from me, and so we hung out. Really interesting guy. He's the author of Never Enough, which is a book about leadership and about his time as the commander of SEAL Team 2. He's now the chief of staff, or he's now the chief digital transformation officer at a company called VMware. But this book is really fascinating. I highly recommend that you get it if you're interested in these types of leadership books and talking to folks who are military leaders. And, well, I just thought it'd be interesting to talk with Mike about Afghanistan because he led a 2,000-person special ops task force in Southeast Afghanistan. He had 22 years as a Navy SEAL. He's a White House fellow. He was the director of defense policy and strategy at National Security Council. And he worked for both Bush and Obama. And so I thought it'd be great to talk with him. Now, we did talk like over a week ago before all these Americans were killed in the latest developments. But I wanted to give his perspective, as I've given so many others as well. We don't agree on everything here, but I always enjoy talking with Mike about everything, period. Here we go. Mike is on Twitter at This Is Mike Hayes. His book is Never Enough, and I would love for you to get that, reach out to him, and it was great talking with Mike. Here we go. Let's do it. Oh, yeah. Look at you.
Hey, brother.
Look tanned and handsome.
Well, the white shirt always makes you look more.
Is that? Yeah, I got to get some more white shirt. Good to see you, man. I just went down it's so how the internet can take you so quickly, and I was just prepping for you. And the next thing I know, I'm watching some guy land a plane on a carrier like 2 minutes later.
Yeah, it's like when you're interested in everything, the bad news is that everything interests you.
Real quick, just because I was watching that video, who is considered cooler, Navy SEAL or pilots? And then as a secondary question, are fighter pilots cooler than, some of the radar planes that don't go as fast and have as much weaponry? The cool quotient on the ship, sir.
Well, it depends on your need, right? When you're actually needing information from that really slow flying plane that looks very not sexy, those things are amazing. So it depends on the time of the day and the day of the week.
Also, so just another question as I get started talking to you. Did you spend most of the time on ships or boats? And which do you call them, ships or boats? Which one would get me punched in the face or slapped?
Oh, yeah. If you call it a boat, you'd get absolutely slapped. Billy.
Okay, good. So is that where you spend most of the time, on ships?
No, hardly any. I spent 20 years in the Navy. I tried to stay off those things that float.
Why?
I just, it's never, to me, it's never where the action is. And, when you're somebody that likes to go run on beaches or just get fresh air. Well, there's plenty of fresh air, but it's just a little bit confining.
Right. Oh, well, yeah, of course. Can I say on the record where you just were? Because I have a question about the thing that you did on vacation.
Which thing? Sorry?
On vacation.
From Cozumel?
Yeah, because I just thought you mentioned, I can edit this out.
Yeah, totally.
Well, you mentioned that you and your daughter, I forget, like 20 or something, but you went scuba diving. And I was like, well, if you're a Navy SEAL and you're just like scuba diving for leisure, or more importantly, like when we were at the resort we went to last week, somebody asked me if I'm scuba certified. I was like, no, I've never gone more than 10 feet underwater. But if someone asked you that, you'd be like, yes.
It is funny because you always get the question, like, are you certified? And I never say anything past yes.
Oh, yeah. What if there was a follow-up? Oh, yeah, where did you get certified?
Yeah, the School of Hard Knocks.
Oh, because my answer would have potentially been, because they were certifying people for like $500. My answer would have been Club Med, and your answer would have been what is the beach where the training is for SEALs?
The Silver Strand in Coronado, California.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, listen, the fun stuff is over. I really want to talk with you about this very serious issue unfolding in Afghanistan. I'm trying to get as many perspectives as I can from people who serve, from human rights folks, from anybody who wants to obviously weigh in. But what can you say about your service, your time that you spent in the country of Afghanistan?
I mean, I can say you can ask me anything. I don't. If I can talk about everything that I won't cross any confidentiality lines, but that's like 2%, the last 2%.
Yeah. So what did you do there? How much time did you spend there? What were the kind of things that you were doing?
Yeah. So I was there for 10 months, and in the most recent stretch, that was 2012, I was the commander of SEAL Team 2, and SEAL Team 2 went overseas, and we took over the Special Operations Task Force in southeastern Afghanistan. So we had what grew from like a team of 200 people to over 2,000 person task force that was integrated between Army, all different services, and the entire gamut of everything special operations. So Special Operations Task Force Southeast was responsible for all special operations in the southeastern part of Afghanistan, which was a very large swath.
And you said that was the last time you were there, but you and other deployments, you were also in Afghanistan. So you
I had been there previously, but I also had done I spent a lot of Iraq time. So,
So when you were, what was, I mean, were you training others, and were you ever involved with training Afghans?
Absolutely. So one of the core missions in Afghanistan was, of course, to, prepare the country for what we just saw, just to prepare for a day when we'd be gone. Our job is to work ourselves out of a job, to create security, stability, infrastructure, governance. Like the SEAL, a lot of times people associate SEALs with just, direct action, dark of the night, save the day, save the hostage or something like that. And while that's true, we also, in the special operations community at large, are really just there to go figure out what needs to get done and work backward from that and say, how do we do that?
Yeah, but I mean, I understand that in theory, but in terms of the resources, if you're the most elite unit, is it the best thing to have you training other people? And I guess if you were training them, were you training the best of the best that Afghan had to be special ops themselves? Because we did hear a lot, and I've read a bit about the kind of Afghan special forces. I forget what they were called.
Commandos. There were a bunch of different units, but look, the answer has multiple levels.
Sure.
On one level, we are simultaneously creating security by taking training and taking local Afghan forces out on missions with us. In the beginning, though, it was adding 2 or 3 people into our mix and saying, hey, here's as observers. But then as the war progressed through the years, was us trying to move more to the rear and have the Afghans in the front and them assuming their own risk for their own nation. And that's what that's really think of the war, Pete, and think of the effort with 3 different lines of operations. One is security, one is governance, and the other is infrastructure.
So that's clear, hold, build almost.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Yep.
So how did you have, you yourself, Mike, have direct interaction with Afghans that you were working with, training with? And if so, how would you describe them? Tell me about how they...
Look, let me just start with this. I mean, SEAL's job is to stop bad people from doing bad things to good people. So that starts with being able to differentiate the bad people from the good people wherever we are. That isn't always easy. Think of 3 categories. There are people who are clearly bad and will always be bad. There are people who are good and will always be good. It's that middle group that's harder to parse out, because sometimes people change their jerseys through time or in given hours of the day. And so it's hard to fight an enemy that sometimes, is in the field with a hoe and doing whatever farmers do. I don't know what the right analogy is, or carrying a weapon, So that's the group that's tough.
I mean, but that's always been the case from Vietnam up, through with counterinsurgency, and that when you live amongst the people and you're a militant, you can kind of code switch or literally, change uniforms. Although, was the beard an identifying factor?
Not really. I mean,
right.
There's no identifying factor that works 100% of the time. Yeah. And that's where the more time that we would have in country, the easier it becomes to identify the various tells or features. And so, but back to your other question, look, I've drank like hundreds or thousands of gallons of tea with, lots of Afghan leadership. I've been in small villages in the middle of nowhere, given speeches to, a village of 300 people, knowing that some people associated with the Taliban are in the audience, and me standing in front of some makeshift podium, if you will, and just kind of being thankful that I have other SEALs who are watching the crowd and making sure nothing bad is going to happen to me.
Mike, I always feel like the hardest thing for you or anybody addressing the people in the country that you're in, Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere else, whether you're one-on-one with somebody or a family or you're addressing 300 of them, What you're trying to do is tell them why you're there. You're trying to win hearts and minds, frankly. You're saying, we're here to help you. We want to help you. This is what we can do. This is what we need from you. I'm guessing. I have no idea what this is like. But it must be frustrating because you must, in the back of your mind, know that it's going to be hard for me to keep these promises because even though you are in charge there of Special Ops Task Force Southeast, you have orders that you have to take. My point being, like we're not going to leave you behind, or we're going to get you this. We're going to get. You can say that, but you might not because of the leadership all the way up. And leaving politics aside, Republican or Democratic presidents, I think there's been 4 since we've been in Afghanistan. You might make a promise to this village, and then all of a sudden you find out, or the orders change, or in this case, that we're going to talk more specifically about in a minute. You're gone. It's time to go. What's that like? Am I hitting on any remote truths?
You're nailing one of the most critical issues. But here's the thing: is that it's all about judgment, and don't promise things that you never make. It's just like life. It's what our parents told us: don't promise things that you can't keep. And so, but at the same time, be smart about creating a vision for the country, right? And so, first of all, what matters is that there is a clear vision for an awesome future, and then helping people, those 300, for example, people in the audience when I'm talking, what I think doesn't really matter. What matters is what they think. Do they see a vision for their nation and for how they want to live? And then how much price are they willing to pay in order to go achieve that vision? It's just like anything in life. And so, and you have to have the will, the determination, the courage, and to go achieve the vision that you want to achieve. And that's honestly, that's why you just saw the Afghan army fold as fast as it did.
All right. I'm just hitting record here on the video. I've got it all on audio, obviously. So let me also ask you about your overall opinion on how you think the war was fought and lost, and what, if anything else, could have been done differently given the circumstances. I still feel like we never, ever should have gone in there because we should have learned the lessons of both America and Vietnam and any country ever in Afghanistan. I felt like that was kind of an obvious thing. You can't go into somebody else's house and tell them how to make it better unless they want to make it better, and you have to consider the history. So what's your kind of analysis of the overall mission in Afghanistan? We kicked the Taliban out 20 years ago after they harbored or protected the terrorist group that attacked us, and they came back, and now we're leaving, and they're back 20 years later.
Yeah, well, let me start, Pete. We disagree on whether, we should have gone in the first place. I firmly believe that, the more we fight overseas in true international, transnational threats, the better off we are at home. So that premise, let me just set that aside for a second, because what you said, though, there's a lot to what you said, which is the strategy, the how, a lot of us could have told you a long time ago that the vision, the will, the courage, the commitment of the Afghan army in order to go to create the future wasn't there. And so, we papered over a bunch of things for the last, 21-year wars, as many people say. And so it's a challenging situation. It's just really, really disappointing and unfortunate to see things have transpired as quickly as they did.
Well, is what you're saying, though, we thought if we train these people, gave them all the resources, training, and weapons and technology they need, they could stand up their own security force and keep the Taliban out. But what really did happen, and what it sounds like you're saying, if I'm hearing you, is as you're training them, you're realizing these guys aren't going to be able to get the job done as soon as we leave.
That's exactly the question that we had, which is, how do we create an Afghan force that, as we slowly back out through time, will be able to move more and more to the forefront, assume the risk for they assume the risk for their own nation, so that we assume less risk and we ideally use less resources over time. And so the strategic question really is, what's the benefit for being there for our nation? In the beginning, it's obviating transnational threats. But, and then ideally, there are really noble causes. One of the best gifts I've ever received in my life, in my entire life. I turned 50 a couple months ago. It was a basket of fruit from a village elder when we cleared out, 30 or 40 Taliban from his village. And he said, I'd like to present this fruit to you because we now can train young girls and women in our schools and you have completely cleared the Taliban out of this village, and we can have peace and prosperity in the life that we want. The question is, why wasn't anybody in the last weeks or years from the Afghan side ready to step forward and do what it takes in order to protect that situation? It's beyond me.
Do you still have that basket of fruit, Mike?
I ate it. I ate it that day. I have a great picture.
Yes, it's still rotting. It's rotting. That's a really interesting story. One of the things that we're constantly told throughout the 20-year campaign in Afghanistan was that we had to be there to prevent Al-Qaeda from coming back in and being able to organize another terrorist attack. I think that excuse lives on the top of bullshit mountain, Mike, because we all know that the only thing you need to organize a terrorist attack, including the one that occurred on 9/11, is an internet connection. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. You don't need a country, a place to be, or a training camp. That always seemed to be either stupid or dishonest, that excuse. You went all over the world busting terrorists. They didn't need a place to organize their attacks. They needed an internet connection. What am I missing?
Well, what you're missing, Pete, is that we can't be everywhere. You're totally right. We as a nation cannot be everywhere. It's not our job to be everywhere. But what we can do is help places that need asymmetric help. And so our goal really in Afghanistan early in the war was, like we just said, was to create that situation and the conditions so that we can back out and have less, first of all, reduce that middle group that I talked about that could swing into terrorism or could swing into goodness, and to sway them into giving them peace, prosperity, standard of living that reduces the threat and helps the globe in the long run. So that's really what the goal of the war was us to help an infrastructure and help the Afghans, the good Afghans who will always be good, to create the nation that they deserve. That just didn't happen in the long run. So, yeah, I mean, I just get so frustrated even because there's 20 countries we could do that in. Of course, yeah. So but the question has to be why. And my question to anybody who fought that war is, if you don't have kind of a clear incentive that you can make personal, whether it's real or not, then you're not going to have the kind of determination that the people you're fighting have, because it's their house. Totally. It is their house. And so what we're, the point that you're making before is spot on. We can't, we're agreeing we can't be everywhere. And so how do you decide where to be? Yeah. So it's really easy right now, 20 years later, to say, hey, we need to rewind the clock 20 years with the information that existed on the planet at that time to say, was that the right decision given that moment? Remember, we were right off of 9/11, and we didn't have, ISIS, and that Sunni extremism in Iraq was not, what it grew to be over the years. The safe havens in Africa weren't even really a thing that were on the radar at the time. And so, we applied our resources where they would do the greatest good for the nation. And so that decision at the time was absolutely to reduce the transnational threat in Afghanistan. And so, in today, is it Yemen? Is it Africa? Is it, where is it and where do we go? That's a question that we make with the information that's available today. Do you think what is your opinion about when it comes to Iraq, where you also served? Do you think that the people who say the Bush administration took its eye off bin Laden and Afghanistan and started a war, invaded, whatever, went to Iraq, and that therefore meant the Afghan campaign suffered from resources, lack of attention, and kind of a mission confusion? Well, I think that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. The American military is better than that. And so there is an element of what you're saying. Whenever you do two things, it is harder to do two things. But the military is capable of working in two different places. And so I don't totally. Well, I think the premise of what you're saying is correct, but I don't think it necessarily yielded an outcome that ultimately affected the outcome that we're seeing today. So how closely, Mike, have you watched the last, either few weeks, months, or years in Afghanistan? I would say pretty closely. I retired in 2013, but I mean, I'm still consider myself very much a part of the community and an interested party in what happens there. And I was, of course, cheering for, that village in Chora, Afghanistan, to still be able to educate their women, and to hear that right now, women aren't walking on the streets of Kabul. Like, that really pains me, man. It's disappointing.
You talking to anybody over there, people who know what's going on?
I am talking to some people, yeah.
So what are your thoughts about what's happened and what's unfolded, and if mistakes were made, what they were? And I also, I got to go in a minute. You got to let you go in a minute here. I really got to know what you think about the controversy, which sadly, in my opinion, always comes up about resettling Afghans. The far right is doing a lot of fear mongering that, we're going to be bringing more terrorists in and all that. But then I hear from so many in the military that are doing everything they can all day long, putting their jobs aside to get the guys that they know and their families out. So what are your overall thoughts on what you're seeing, what went wrong, and how do you feel about the resettlement issue?
It's a great topic, and I think it's one of the things that has been the most bungled. I think the decision to withdraw was the right decision. I'm on record saying that. I think the how has been an F. Like, if you could give a lower grade than an F, I'd say it's an F minus. And one of the things, when you say, well, why? Let's unpack that. Look, we've known forever to that different contingencies could arise. What's the ultimate outcome going to be? Hey, at some point we may want to grant special immigrant visas. How do we have a clarified policy that sees around the corner and says, hey, when this happens, here's what we will do? I did not see that out of Washington, D.C. And if you look at the amount of time that it took to make decisions around special immigrant visas, like it's appalling to me. And so I believe that that anybody who served and assisted us in our mission should have an opportunity to come back with us. Look, I mean, you can't, we have to worry about things like brain drain in other places. But when the Taliban comes over, let's take all of the talent that there is in Afghanistan. Let's get them education. Let's get them contributing members of society. Yeah. And I guarantee you, Pete, that in 10 years and in 20 years, the stories that we would hear from immigrants who create the next Uber or the next Facebook or whatever would be like, yeah, you know what? Thank God my mom and dad were on the C-17 that came out of Afghanistan 20 years ago, because if not, then we wouldn't have this new spaceship that I invented. And so I really deeply believe, if you go back to GDP, it's just labor times productivity. And that is what equals the total economic output of any nation. Why wouldn't we take the talented labor that there is? Maybe, it's different. We have to be tolerant of different people who aren't like us. Maybe people dress differently. Maybe people, look differently. Who cares? I can tell you there's a lot of great Afghans with incredible hearts and incredible minds, and we would benefit greatly from having them in our country, contributing over the coming years.
What is something you learned from an Afghan, whether it be, cultural, health, religious values, morals?
What's fascinating to me, Pete, is that there's no Netflix in Afghanistan. So, there's people aren't staring at tablets and iPhones all day long. So what I learned in meeting, hundreds of meetings with Afghans, was that they study your facial expressions and your tone and your posture like no other. And I think that just like I always hear that, Alaskans have, or Eskimos have 1,000 words for snow, and like to you and I, it's just snow. It's the same thing. The people in Afghanistan can study us. And I believe that they draw a lot of insight from things that we miss in the constant busyness of our day. So it was fascinating to me to watch them watch us and to think, what are they thinking and gaining from us? And I had conversations like that with some of my Afghan friends, and I learned a lot from them.
Mike, I really appreciate you joining me on short notice. It's great to connect. It's always great to talk to you. Thank you.
My pleasure, man. Always a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for all you do.
All right, there he goes. Mike Hayes, former commander of SEAL Team 2. Like I said, we talked a little over a week ago, and I finally got this on here, and I'm happy I did. I hope you enjoyed it. He's on Twitter at ThisIsMikeHayes. Go get his book, Never Enough. and let him know that you heard him here on the podcast. All right, I got to post this, baby. Sorry it's late on a Monday morning, but hopefully, you hear it when you hear it because it's a podcast, as my friends try to tell me. Don't worry about it, Pete. Get your rest. You don't want to phone it in. Thank you to David Campbell for insisting I go to bed on Sunday night. I got a lot of good friends, and many of them are you. Thank you very much for tuning in, for supporting the podcast. If you haven't signed up for a paid subscription, now is the time. What are you waiting for? Patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes. All right, folks, that's it for today. Tomorrow, Tim Wise, and I'm not sure who else is going to join me yet. Maybe J.L. Covan, maybe somebody else. I'm working on it. That is what I'm doing right now. But let me go post this. I love you guys. Thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Take it away, John Carroll.
When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.